Hello and welcome back to Faceless Security, where we explore the world of technology and cybersecurity. In this video, we'll be discussing several laws relevant to cybercrime. Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health, HITECH Act. This act requires healthcare providers and their business associates to implement specific privacy and security measures to safeguard electronic protected health information, EPHI. It also imposes penalties for non-compliance and provides incentives for the adoption of electronic health records. California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. This law gives California residents the right to know what personal information businesses are collecting about them, the right to request that their information be deleted, and the right to opt out of the sale of their personal information. Businesses must also disclose their data collection and sharing practices to consumers. Economic Espionage Act of 1996. This act prohibits the theft or misappropriation of trade secrets and provides criminal penalties for individuals or organizations that engage in such activities. Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act of 1999. This law requires financial institutions to inform consumers of their privacy policies and to provide opt-out options for the sharing of personal information with third parties. U.S. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986. This act prohibits unauthorized access to computer systems and networks, as well as activities such as the installation of malware or the theft of confidential information. U.S. Electronic Communications Privacy Act, ECPA, of 1986. This law regulates government access to electronic communications, such as email and text messages, and sets requirements for obtaining warrants to access such communications. U.S. Computer Security Act of 1987. This law requires federal agencies to implement security measures to protect computer systems and the information they contain. The Computer Misuse Act of 1990, UK. This act criminalizes unauthorized access to computer systems and networks, as well as activities such as the installation of malware or the theft of confidential information. U.S. Federal Sentencing Guidelines of 1991. While not specific to computer crime, these guidelines establish penalties for companies that fail to implement adequate compliance programs, including those related to data protection and privacy. U.S. Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act of 1994. This act requires telecommunications companies to design their networks to allow for lawful government interception of communications. U.S. Economic Espionage Act of 1996. This law prohibits the theft or misappropriation of trade secrets and provides criminal penalties for individuals or organizations that engage in such activities. U.S. Child Pornography Prevention Act of 1996. This act criminalizes the production, distribution, and possession of child pornography, including electronic forms of such material. Safe Harbor, 1998. This agreement between the U.S. and the European Union allowed U.S. companies to transfer personal data from the EU to the U.S. while adhering to certain privacy principles. However, this agreement was invalidated by the EU Court of Justice in 2015. Information Technology Act 2000, India. This law regulates the use of electronic communications and transactions in India, including the protection of electronic records and the prevention of cybercrimes. USA Patriot Act of 2001. This law expanded the government's surveillance powers in response to the September 11 terrorist attacks, including the ability to access electronic communications and data without a warrant in certain circumstances. The Council of Europe's Convention on Cybercrime, 2001. This international treaty establishes standards for cybercrime laws and provides a framework for international cooperation in the investigation and prosecution of cybercrimes. Cybercrime Act of 2001, Australia. This law criminalizes various types of cybercrimes, including unauthorized access to computer systems and networks, and provides criminal penalties for individuals who engage in such activities. U.S. Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act, also known as the Public Company Accounting Reform and Investor Protection Act, was introduced in the wake of accounting scandals such as Enron and WorldCom. It establishes requirements for public company boards, management, and public accounting firms. Among other things, the Act requires that public companies establish internal controls and procedures for financial reporting to prevent fraud, and imposes severe penalties for noncompliance. U.S. Homeland Security Act of 2002. The Homeland Security Act of 2002 created the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, a cabinet-level department responsible for coordinating efforts to protect the United States against terrorism and other threats. The Act established various information-sharing mechanisms and required federal agencies to implement information security measures. California Security Breach Information Act, 2002. The California Security Breach Information Act, SB 1386, was the first state law in the United States to require organizations to notify California residents if their personal information is compromised in a security breach. The law applies to businesses that conduct business in California and maintain personal information about California residents. U.S. Controlling the Assault of Non-Solicited Pornography and Marketing, CAN-SPAM, Act of 2003. The CAN-SPAM Act regulates commercial email messages and requires commercial emails to include certain content, such as an opt-out mechanism. The law also prohibits false or misleading header information and deceptive subject lines in emails. U.S. Identity Theft and Assumption Deterrence Act of 2003. The Identity Theft and Assumption Deterrence Act of 2003 made identity theft a federal crime and established criminal penalties for the unauthorized use or transfer of another person's personal information. Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations of 2003, UK. The Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations of 2003, PCR, is a UK law that regulates the use of electronic communications, including email, phone calls, and text messages. Among other things, PCR requires that organizations obtain prior consent before sending electronic marketing communications. U.S. Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004. The Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004 established the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI, and reorganized the U.S. intelligence community. The Act also includes provisions related to information sharing and information security. U.S. Federal Information Systems Modernization Act of 2014. The Federal Information Systems Modernization Act, FISMA, of 2014 modernized the federal government's approach to information security by shifting the focus from compliance-based to risk-based security management. The Act requires federal agencies to develop and implement information security programs, including risk management and continuous monitoring. General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, EU, 2018. The General Data Protection Regulation is a European Union regulation that sets out requirements for the protection of personal data. The GDPR applies to all organizations that process the personal data of EU residents, regardless of where the organization is located. The regulation imposes significant fines for noncompliance. Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS. The Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard is a set of security requirements for organizations that handle payment card data. The standard was created by major payment card brands and requires organizations to implement various security measures, such as network segmentation, encryption, and access control to protect cardholder data. While cybersecurity professionals are not required to be experts in law enforcement, possessing a fundamental comprehension of contemporary laws and issues pertaining to cybercrime is beneficial. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more great content from Faceless Security.